शिल भक्ति वेदांत वामन गोसाई महाराज की जय। नितिल विष्णु विष्णुपाद शतर शतस्मर शिल भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज शिल प्रभुपाद की जय। विष्णु विष्णुपाद शतर शतस्मर शिल भक्ति विज्ञान केशव गोसाई महाराज की जय। नितिल विष्णु विष्णुपाद शतर शतस्मर शिल भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोसाई प्रभुपाद की जय। नितिल विष्णु महाभागवत शिल गोक्षर स्वामी महाराज की जय। नितिल विष्णु शिल सच्चिदानंद भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय। नितिल विष्णु वैष्णव सार्वभौम शिल जगन्नाथ दास बाबूजी महाराज की जय। श्री रूप गौरी गुरु वर्ग की जय। श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल पतदास गुणाचार्य गोसाई प्रभु की जय। श्री स्वरूप दामोदर राय रामानंदारी श्री गोपाल वृंद की जय। नाम आचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल व्रज मंडल मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जय। सर्व अभिष्ट विराट गिरिराज महाराज की जय। श्री राधा कुंज श्याम कुंज की जय। श्री मुन देवी गंगा देवी की जय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री पूर्णमासी योगमाया की जय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जय। श्री ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्-भागवतम की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ओम ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपदाय राधिकाय प्रियात्मने श्रीमद्भक्तिवेदान्त नारायणीति नामिने। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नाम्ने गौरतिशे नमः। गुरुवे गौरचन्द्राय राधिकाय तदालये कृष्णाय कृष्णभक्ताय तरभक्ताय नमो नमः। यं प्रव्रजन्तम् अनुपेतमपेतकृत्यं द्वैपायनो विरहकातर आजुहावो पुत्रेति तन्मयतया तरवोऽभिनेदुस्तं सर्वभूतहृदयं मुनिमानतोऽस्मि। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयम् उदीरयेत्। शृण्वतं स्वकथा कृष्ण पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तन हृदन्तस्थो ह्यभद्राणि विधुनोति सुहृत्सतं। नष्टप्रायेष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवत्युत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। तवैवास्मि न जीवामि त्वया विना इति विज्ञाय राधे त्वां नायमां चरणान्तिकं। भक्त्या विहीना अपराधलक्षय क्षिप्ताष्टकामादितरङ्गमध्ये कृपामयि त्वां शरणं प्रपन्ना वृन्दे नमस्ते चरणारविन्दं। भज श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरि गौर भक्तवृन्द। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। So, very quick recap. Yesterday I did a recap, but I think I did too soon of a recap. But yeah. So Diti, she implored Kashyapa to unite with her, like sexual union, and but he said this is a bad time. This is a time that Shiva is, traveling, with all his ghosts and everybody, and so this is a bad time. We should wait a little while. But she implored him, no, like right now, and so then, and he didn't even engage in his evening duties, and so anyhow, then she was impregnated, and then he said to her, now everything is inauspicious because your mind's pollution, because of the time, the negligence of my direction, apathy towards the demigods. For all these reasons, you're going to have 2 contemptuous sons who will constantly afflict the 3 worlds. They'll kill innocent and sinless living entities, they'll torture women, enrage the great souls, and thus they'll be killed by the Supreme Lord. And then she said, it is good that my sons will be killed by the Lord, but may they never be killed by the wrath of a Brahmin or the inhabitants of... Yeah. She said, even the inhabitants of hell do not favor one who is condemned by a Brahmin. And then Kashyapa said to Diti, because of your repentance, your patience, your proper deliberation, and unflinching faith in the Lord, and also respect for Lord Shiva, he said, may one of your grandsons be a great devotee and become equally famous as the Lord. And that grandson that he's glorifying is Prahlad Maharaj. He starts saying all these different glories of Prahlad Maharaj. And so then hearing that her grandson will be a great devotee and her sons will be killed by the Lord, Diti was satisfied. But then inside Diti's womb, these 2 demons were there for 100 years. And by the force of Diti's pregnancy, darkness spread in all directions. And the demigods approached Brahma and asked him about the cause of this darkness. And so they made all these prayers to Brahma. And then Brahma, he replied to the Devatas, being pleased by this prayer. He said, and then he told the story that we already did a recap of yesterday, about how the 4 Kumaras, they went to Vaikuntha, and he talks about how amazing Vaikuntha is, and how beautiful. He talks about the forest, the Lord, the forest, the couples there, the birds, the plants, the airplanes, and the men, and the Vaikuntha women, and anyhow, and then they walked past the 7 gates, and they were stopped by Jai and Vijay, and then they curse Jai and Vijay. Then the Lord arrives, gives darshan to the Kumaras. The Kumaras offer prayers to the Lord, and that's where we are. We're at the Kumaras are offering prayers to the Lord. Kumara uchu yontar hito hridigato piduratmana manam. Oops, tvam. Sadaiva no nayana mulam anantaradha yareva karna vivarena guham katona pitanuvarnitaraha bavarur bhavena. The Kumara said, our dear Lord, you are not manifested to rascals, even though you are seated within the heart of everyone. But as far as we are concerned, we see you face to face, although you are unlimited. The statements we have heard about you from our father, Brahma, through the ears have now been actually realized by your kind appearance. Purports by Srila Prabhupada. The so-called yogis who concentrate their minds or meditate upon the impersonal or void are described here. This verse of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam describes persons who are expected to be very eager yogis, expert yogis, engaged in meditation, but who do not find the Supreme Personality of Godhead seated within the heart. These persons are described here as duratma, which means a person who has a very crooked heart, or less intelligent person, just opposite to a mahatma, which means one who has a broad heart. Those so-called yogis who, although engaged in meditation, are not broad-hearted, cannot find the four-handed Narayan form, even though he is seated within their heart. Although the first realization of the Supreme Absolute Truth is impersonal Brahman, one should not remain satisfied with experiencing the impersonal effulgence of the Supreme Lord. In the Ishupanishad also, the devotee prays that the glaring effulgence of Brahman may be removed from his eyes, so that he can see the real personal feature of the Lord, and thus satisfy himself fully. Similarly, although the Lord is not visible in the beginning because of his glaring bodily effulgence, if a devotee sincerely wants to see him, the Lord is revealed to him. It is said in Bhagavad Gita that the Lord cannot be seen by our imperfect eyes. He cannot be heard by our imperfect ears. He cannot be experienced by our imperfect senses. But if one engages in devotional service with faith and devotion, then God reveals himself. Here the four sages, Sanat Kumar, Sanatan, Sanandan, and Sanak, are described as actually sincere devotees. Although they heard from their father Brahma about the personal feature of the Lord, only the impersonal feature, Brahman, was revealed to them. But because they were sincerely searching for the Lord, they finally saw his personal feature directly, which corresponded with the description given by their father. Thus they became fully satisfied. Here they expressed their gratitude because although they were foolish impersonalists in the beginning, by the grace of the Lord they could now have the good fortune to see his personal feature. Another significant aspect of this verse is that the sages describe their experience of hearing from their father, Brahma, who was born of the Lord directly. In other words, the disciplic succession from the Lord to Brahma, and from Brahma to Narad, and from Narad to Vyas, and so on, is accepted here. Because the Kumaras were sons of Brahma, they had the opportunity to learn Vedic knowledge from the disciplic succession of Brahma, and therefore, in spite of their impersonalist beginnings, they became, in the end, direct seers of the personal feature of the Lord. And I think there's a really big distinction between a Mayavadi and a Brahmavadi. The four Kumaras were Brahmavadis. They weren't offensive to the Lord. They didn't say that Bhagavan was under the control of Maya. They just only understood the impersonal feature of Bhagavan, the Brahma feature. But they weren't offensive. And therefore, it was as soon as they saw Bhagavan, they immediately became devotees. And it's a similar thing in the beginning of Jaiva Dharma. Right? Sannyasi Thakur, he was a Brahmavadi. He wasn't a Mayavadi, he was a Brahmavadi. And then as soon as he came in contact with a pure devotee, immediately he became a pure devotee pretty soon afterwards because he was already purified of all his material coverings. Okay. Tang tvam vidama bhagavan paramatma tattvam satvena sampratirataim rachayantameshan yatte nutapa viditar drida bhakti yogar udgrantayo hridi vidur munayo viraga. We know that you are the Supreme Absolute Truth, the Personality of Godhead, who manifests his transcendental form in the uncontaminated mode of pure goodness. This transcendental, eternal form of your personality can be understood only by your mercy, through unflinching devotional service, by great sages whose hearts have been purified in the devotional way. Purport. The Absolute Truth can be understood in three features: impersonal Brahman, localized Paramatma, and Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Here it is admitted that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the last word in understanding the Absolute Truth. Even though the four Kumaras were instructed by their great learned father, Brahma, they could not actually understand the Absolute Truth. They could only understand the supreme absolute truth when they personally saw the personality of Godhead with their own eyes. In other words, if one sees or understands the supreme personality of Godhead, the other two features of the absolute truth, namely impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma, are also automatically understood. Therefore, the Kumaras confirm, you are the ultimate absolute truth. The impersonalist may argue that since the supreme personality of Godhead was so nicely decorated, he was therefore not the absolute truth. But here it is confirmed that all the variegatedness of the absolute platform is constituted of Shuddha Sattva, pure goodness. In the material world, any quality, goodness, passion, or ignorance, is contaminated. Even the quality of goodness here in the material world is not free from the tinges of passion and ignorance. But in the transcendental world, only pure goodness, without any tinge of passion or ignorance, exists. Therefore, the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His variegated pastimes and paraphernalia are all pure sattva guna. Such variegatedness in pure goodness is exhibited eternally by the Lord for the satisfaction of the devotee. The devotee does not want to see the Supreme Personality of Absolute Truth in voidness or impersonalism. In one sense, absolute transcendental variegatedness is meant only for the devotees, not for others, because this distinct feature of transcendental variegatedness can be understood only by the mercy of the Supreme Lord and not by mental speculation or the ascending process. It is said that one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead when one is even slightly favored by Him. Otherwise, without His mercy, a man may speculate for thousands of years and not understand what is actually the absolute truth. This mercy can be perceived by the devotee when he is completely freed from contamination. It is stated, therefore, that only when all contamination is rooted out and the devotee is completely detached from material attractions can he receive this mercy of the Lord. Natyantikam viganayat yantapite prasadam kim vanyararpita bhayam bhruva unayaiste yenga tvarangri sharana bhavata kataya kirtanya tirta yashasa kushala rasagya. Persons who are very expert and most intelligent in understanding things as they are engage in hearing narrations of the auspicious activities and pastimes of the Lord, which are worth chanting and worth hearing. Such persons do not care even for the highest material benediction, namely liberation, to say nothing of other less important benedictions like the material happiness of the heavenly kingdom. Purport. The transcendental bliss enjoyed by the devotees of the Lord is completely different from the material happiness enjoyed by less intelligent persons. The less intelligent persons in the material world are engaged by the four principles of benediction called Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Generally, they prefer to take to religious life to achieve some material benediction, the purpose of which is to satisfy the senses. When, by that process, they become confused or frustrated in fulfilling the maximum amount of sense enjoyment, they try to become one with the Supreme, which is, according to their conception, mukti, or liberation. Which is, according to their conception, mukti, or liberation. There are 5 kinds of liberation, the least important of which is called sayujya, to become one with the Supreme. Devotees don't care for such liberation because they are actually intelligent. Nor are they inclined to accept any other 4 kinds of liberation, namely to live on the same planet as the Lord, to live with Him side by side as an associate, to have the same opulence, and to attain the same bodily features. They are concerned only with glorifying the Supreme Lord and His auspicious activities. Pure devotional service is Shravanam Kirtanam. Pure devotees who take transcendental pleasure in hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord do not care for any kind of liberation, Even if they are offered the five liberations, they refuse to accept them, as stated in the Bhagavatam in the 3rd canto. Materialistic persons aspire for the sense enjoyment of heavenly pleasure in the heavenly kingdom, but devotees reject such material pleasure at once. The devotee does not even care for the post of Indra. A devotee knows that any pleasurable material position is subject to be annihilated at a certain point. Even if one reaches the post of Indra, Chandra, or any other demigod, he must be dissolved at a certain stage. A devotee is never interested in such temporary pleasure. From Vedic scriptures, it is understood that sometimes even Brahma and Indra fall down, but a devotee in the transcendental abode of the Lord never falls. How can people come to the conclusion that the jiva falls from Vaikuntha? Srila Prabhupada just says that here. This transcendental stage of life, in which one feels transcendental pleasure in hearing the Lord's pastimes, is also recommended by Lord Chaitanya. When Lord Chaitanya was talking with Ramananda Rai, there were varieties of suggestions offered by Ramananda regarding spiritual realization, but Lord Chaitanya rejected all but one, that one should hear the glories of the Lord in association with pure devotees. That is acceptable for everyone, especially in this age. One should engage himself in hearing from pure devotees about the activities of the Lord. That is considered the supreme benediction for mankind. As we've been reading, actually from the very beginning of this Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam thing, I've been looking out for any hints from Srila Prabhupada that the jiva falls from Vaikuntha, and I haven't found anything. I haven't even found anything where he's alluding to that. And I've seen quite the opposite. Srila Prabhupada saying things like, the devotee never falls from the transcendental abode. Anyhow, it's so strange, huh? Kamang bhavasa vrijana nirayeshu nastach cheta livaryadinute padayorameta vachasthanastula sivaryaditengrik shobha puryetate gunaganar yadikarnarandra. O Lord, we pray that you let us be born in any hellish condition of life, just as long as our hearts and minds are always engaged in the service of your lotus feet. Our words are made beautiful by speaking of your activities, just as tulsi leaves are beautified when offered to your lotus feet, and as long as our ears are always filled with the chanting of your transcendental qualities. That's a beautiful prayer. Purport. The four sages now offer their humility to the personality of Godhead because of their having been haughty and cursing the two other devotees of the Lord. Jai and Vijay, the two doorkeepers who checked them from entering the Vaikuntha planet, were certainly offenders. But as Vaishnavas, the four sages should not have cursed him in anger. After the incident, they became conscious that they had done wrong by cursing the devotees of the Lord, and they prayed to the Lord that even in the hellish condition of life, their minds might not be distracted from the engagement of service to the lotus feet of Lord Narayan. Those who are devotees of the Lord are not afraid of any condition of life, provided there is constant engagement in the service of the Lord. It is said of the Narayan Para, or those who are devotees of Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, na kutaschana bibhyati. They are not afraid of entering a hellish condition, for since they are engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, heaven or hell is the same for them. In material life, both heaven and hell are one and the same, because they are material. In either place, there is no engagement in the Lord's service. Therefore, those who are engaged in the service of the Lord see no distinction between heaven and hell. It is only the materialists who prefer one to the other. These four devotees prayed to the Lord that although they might go to hell because they had cursed devotees, they might not forget the service of the Lord. The transcendental loving service of the Lord is performed in three ways: with the body, with the mind, and with words. Here the sages pray that their words may always be engaged in glorifying the Supreme Lord. One may speak very nicely with ornamental language, or one may be expert at controlled grammatical presentation. But if one's words are not engaged in the service of the Lord, they have no flavor and no actual use. The example here is given of tulsi leaves. The tulsi leaf is very useful from the medicinal or antiseptic point of view. It is considered sacred and is offered to the lotus feet of the Lord. The tulsi leaf has numerous good qualities, but if it were not offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, tulsi could not be of much value or importance. Similarly, one may speak very nicely from rhetorical or grammatical points of view, which may be very much appreciated by a materialistic audience. But if one's words are not offered to the service of the Lord, they are useless. The holes of the ears are very small and can be filled with any insignificant sound. So how can they receive as great a vibration as the glorification of the Lord? The answer is that the holes of the ears are like the sky. As the sky can never be filled up, the quality of the ear is such that one may go on pouring in vibrations of various kinds, yet it is capable of receiving more and more vibrations. A devotee is not afraid of going to hell if he has the opportunity to hear the glories of the Lord constantly. This is the advantage of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One may be put in any condition, but God gives him the prerogative to chant Hare Krishna. In any condition of life, if one goes on chanting, he will never be unhappy. Praduscha karta yadidam puruhutta rupam tanesha nivrittim avapuralam trishona tasma idam bhagavate nama irvidhema yonatmanam duruddayo bhagavan pratita. O Lord, we therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto your eternal form as the personality of Godhead, which you have so kindly manifested before us. Your supreme eternal form cannot be seen by unfortunate, less intelligent persons, but we are so much satisfied in our mind and vision to see it. Purport. The four sages were impersonalists in the beginning of their spiritual life, but afterwards, by the grace of their father and spiritual master, Brahma, they understood the eternal spiritual form of the Lord and felt completely satisfied. In other words, the transcendentalists who aspire to the impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma are not fully satisfied and still hanker for more. Even if they are satisfied in their minds, still, transcendentally, their eyes are not satisfied. But as soon as such persons come to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are satisfied in all respects. In other words, they become devotees and want to see the form of the Lord continually. It is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita that one who has developed transcendental love of Krishna by smearing his eyes with the ointment of love sees constantly the eternal form of the Lord. The particular word used in this connection, anatmanam, signifies that those who have no control over the mind and senses and who therefore speculate and want to become one with the Lord. Such persons cannot have the pleasure of seeing the eternal form of the Lord. For the impersonalists and the so-called yogis, the Lord is always hidden by the curtain of Yoga Maya. Bhagavad Gita says that even when Lord Krishna was seen by everyone while he was present on the surface of the earth, the impersonalists and the so-called yogis could not see him because they were devoid of devotional eyesight. The theory of the impersonalists and so-called yogis is that the Supreme Lord assumes a particular form when he comes in touch with Maya, although actually he has no form. This very conception of the impersonalists and the so-called yogis checks him from seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This checks him from seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is. The Lord, therefore, is always beyond the sight of such non-devotees. The four sages felt so much obliged to the Lord that they offered their respectful obeisances unto him again and again. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 3rd canto, 15th chapter of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, entitled Description of the Kingdom of God. Chapter 16. Text 1. Brahmovacha iti tad gridnatam tesham muninam yogadharminam pratinandya jagadeda Vikunta Nilayo Vibhu. Lord Brahma said, after thus congratulating the sages for their nice words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose abode is in the kingdom of God, spoke as follows. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Sorry, I went to sleep at like 2 o'clock in the morning today. Etoto parshado mahyam jaya vijaya evacha kadarti kritamam yarvo bhavakratam atikramam. The personality of Godhead said, these attendants of mine, Jai and Vijay by name, have committed a great offense against you because of ignoring me. Purport. To commit an offense at the feet of a devotee of the Lord is a great wrong. Even when a living entity is promoted to Vaikuntha, there is still the chance that he may commit offenses. But the difference is that when one is in a Vaikuntha planet, even if by chance one commits an offense, he is protected by the Lord. This is the remarkable fact in the dealings of the Lord and the servitor, as seen in the present incident concerning Jai and Vijay. The word atikramam used herein indicates that in offending a devotee, one neglects the Supreme Lord himself. By mistake, the doormen held the sages from entering Vaikuntha Loka, but because they were engaged in transcendental service to the Lord, their annihilation was not expected by advanced devotees. The Lord's presence on the spot was very pleasing to the hearts of the devotees. The Lord understood that the trouble was due to his lotus feet not being seen by the sages, and therefore he wanted to please them by personally going there. The Lord is so merciful that even if there is some impediment for the devotee, he himself manages matters in such a way that the devotee is not bereft of having audience at his lotus feet. There is a very good example in the life of Haridas Thakur. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was residing at Jagannath Puri, Haridas Thakur, who happened to be a Mohammedan by birth, was with him. In Hindu temples, especially in those days, no one but a Hindu was allowed to enter. Although Haridas Thakur was the greatest of all Hindus in his behavior, he considered himself a Mohammedan and did not enter the temple. Lord Chaitanya could understand his humility, and since he did not go to see the temple, Lord Chaitanya himself, who is non-different from Jagannath, used to come and sit with Haridas Thakur daily. Here in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, we also find the same behavior of the Lord. His devotees were prevented from seeing his lotus feet, but the Lord himself came to see them on the same lotus feet for which they aspired. It is also significant that he was accompanied by the goddess of fortune. The goddess of fortune is not to be seen by ordinary persons, but the Lord was so kind that although the devotees did not aspire for such an honor, he appeared before them with the goddess of fortune. Yastvetayor danda bhavarbir mam anuvratai sa evanu matosmabir munayo devahelanat. O great sages, I approve of the punishment that you who are devoted to me have meted out to them. Darva prasadayam yadya brahmadaivam param hime tadhitatma kritam manye yatsvapumbir asatkrita. To me, the Brahman is the highest and most beloved personality. The disrespect shown by my attendants has actually been displayed by me, because the doormen are my servitors. I take this to be an offense by myself, and therefore I seek your forgiveness for the incidents that has arisen. Purport. The Lord is always in favor of the Brahmins and the cows, and therefore it is said, Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha. Lord Krishna, or Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is also the worshipable deity of the Brahmins. In the Vedic literature, in the Rig Mantra hymns of the Rig Veda, it is stated that those who are actually Brahmins always look to the lotus feet of Vishnu. Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Param Sada Pashyanti Suraya. Those who are qualified Brahmins worship only the Vishnu form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which means Krishna, Ram, and all Vishnu expansions. A so-called Brahman who is born in the family of Brahmins but performs activities aimed against the Vaishnavas cannot be accepted as a Brahman, because Brahman means Vaishnav, and Vaishnav means Brahman. One who has become a devotee of the Lord is also a Brahman. The formula is Brahma Janatiti Brahmana. A Brahman is one who has understood Brahman, and a Vaishnav is one who has understood the personality of Godhead. Brahman realization is the beginning of realization of the personality of Godhead. One who understands the personality of Godhead also knows the impersonal feature of the Supreme, which is Brahman. Therefore, one who becomes a Vaishnav is already a Brahman. It should be noted that the glories of the Brahman described in this chapter by the Lord himself refer to his devotee Brahman, or the Vaishnav. It should never be misunderstood that the so-called Brahmins who are born in Brahman families but have no Brahminical qualifications are referred to in this connection. Yanamani chakrinati lokabhrite kritaghasi so sadhu vadastat kirtim hanti tvacham iva maya. A wrong act committed by a servant leads people in general to blame his master, just as a spot of white leprosy on any part of the body pollutes all of the skin. A Vaishnav, therefore, should be fully qualified. As stated in the Bhagavatam, anyone who has become a Vaishnav has developed all the good qualities of the demigods. There are 26 qualifications mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. A devotee should always see that his Vaishnav qualities increase with the advancement of his Krishna consciousness. A devotee should be blameless, because any offense by the devotee is a scar on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The devotee's duty is to be always conscious in his dealings with others, especially with another devotee of the Lord. Yasyamrita malayasha shravana vagaha sadhya punati jagarashva pachar vikunta soham pavadbhya upalabdhas sutirtha kirtish chindyam swabhahom apiva pratikula vritim. Anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandal, who gives by cooking and eating the flesh of the dog, is immediately purified if he takes bath in hearing through the ear the glorification of my name, fame, etc. Now you have realized me without doubt. Therefore I will not hesitate to lop off my own arm if its conduct is found hostile to you. Wow. Purport. Real purification can take place in human society if its members take to Krishna consciousness. This is clearly stated in all Vedic literature. Anyone who takes to Krishna consciousness in all sincerity, even if he is not very advanced in good behavior, is purified. A devotee can be recruited from any section of human society, although it is not expected that everyone in all segments of society is well behaved. As stated in this verse and in many places in Bhagavad Gita, even if one is not born in a Brahman family, or even if he is born in a family of Chandals, if he simply takes to Krishna consciousness, he is immediately purified. In Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, verses 30 to 32, it is clearly stated that even though a man is not well behaved, if he simply takes to Krishna consciousness, he is understood to be a saintly person. As long as a person is in this material world, he has two different relationships in his dealings with others. One relationship pertains to the body, and the other pertains to the spirit. As far as bodily affairs or social activities are concerned, although a person is purified on the spiritual platform, it is sometimes seen that he acts in terms of his bodily relationships. If a devotee born in a family of a Chandal, the lowest caste, is sometimes found engaged in his habitual activities, he is not to be considered a Chandal. In other words, a Vaishnav should not be elevated in terms of his body. The Shastra states that no one should think the deity in the temple to be made of wood or stone, and no one should think that a person coming from a lower caste family who has taken to Krishna consciousness is still of the same low caste. These attitudes are forbidden because anyone who takes to Krishna consciousness is understood to be fully purified. He is at least engaged in the process of purification, and if he sticks to the principle of Krishna consciousness, he will very soon be fully purified. The conclusion is that if one takes to Krishna consciousness with all seriousness, he is to be understood as already purified, and Krishna is ready to give him protection by all means. The Lord assures herein that he is ready to give protection to his devotee, even if there is need to cut off part of his own body. Wow. Yat sevaya charana parma pavitra renum sadhyakshata kilamalam pratilabdha shilam nashir viraktam apimam vijahati asya prekshalavarta itare niyamam vahanti. The Lord continued, "Because I am the servitor of my devotees, my lotus feet have become so sacred that they immediately wipe out all sin, and I have acquired such a disposition that the goddess of fortune does not leave me, even though I have no attachment for her, and others praise her beauty and observe sacred vows to secure from her even a slight favor. Purport. What time is it? Oh my god, it's 7:55. Okay. Just read a little bit more. Purports. The relationship between the Lord and his devotee is transcendently beautiful. As the devotee thinks that it is due to being a devotee of the Lord that he is elevated in all good qualities, so the Lord also thinks that it is because of his devotion to the servitor that all his transcendental glories have increased. In other words, as the devotee is always anxious to render service to the Lord, so the Lord is ever anxious to render service to the devotee. The Lord admits herein that although he certainly has the quality that anyone who receives a slight particle of the dust of his lotus feet becomes at once a great personality, this greatness is due to his affection for his devotee. It is because of this affection that the goddess of fortune does not leave him, and that not only one, but many thousands of goddesses of fortune engage in his service. In the material world, simply to get a little favor from the goddess of fortune, people observe many rigid regulations of austerity and penance. The Lord cannot tolerate any inconvenience on the part of the devotee. He is therefore famous as Bhakta Vatsala. Naham tatadmi yajamana havir vitane shchotad grita plutamadan huta bhun mukena yar brahmanasya mukatascarata nughasam tushtasya maya vahitar nija karma pakai. I do not enjoy the oblations offered by sacrifices in the sacrificial fire, which is one of my own mouths, with the same relish. I do not enjoy oblations offered to the sacrifices in the sacrificial fire with the same relish as I do to the delicacies overflowing with ghee, which are offered to the mouths of the Brahmins, who have dedicated to me the result of their activities and who are ever satisfied with my prasad. Wow. Purport. Okay. Maybe we'll end with this purport, because time's up now. It's almost 8 o'clock. Purports. The devotee of the Lord, or the Vaishnava, does not take anything without offering it to the Lord. Since a Vaishnava dedicates all the results of his activities to the Lord, he does not taste anything eatable which is not first offered to him. The Lord also relishes giving to the Vaishnava's mouth all eatables offered to him. It is clear from this verse that the Lord eats through the sacrificial fire and the Brahman's mouth. So many articles, grains, ghee, etc., are offered in sacrifice for the satisfaction of the Lord. The Lord accepts sacrificial offerings from the Brahmins and devotees, and elsewhere it is stated that whatever is given for the Brahmins and Vaishnavas to eat is also accepted by the Lord. But here it is said that he accepts offerings to the mouths of the Brahmins and Vaishnavas with even greater relish. The best example of this is found in the life of Advaita Prabhu in his dealing with Haridas Thakur. Even though Haridas Thakur was born of a Mohammedan family, Advaita Prabhu offered him the first dish of prasad after the performance of a sacred fire ceremony. Haridas Thakur informed him that he was born of a Mohammedan family and asked why Advaita Prabhu was offering the first dish to a Mohammedan instead of an elevated Brahmin. Out of his humbleness, Haridas condemned himself as a Mohammedan, but Advaita Prabhu, being an experienced devotee, accepted him as a real Brahmin. Advaita Prabhu asserted that by offering the first dish to Haridas Thakur, he was getting the result of feeding 100,000 Brahmins. The conclusion is that if one can feed a Brahmin or Vaishnava, it is better than performing hundreds of thousands of sacrifices. In this age, therefore, it is recommended that Harer Nama, chanting the holy name of God, and pleasing the Vaishnava are the only means to elevate oneself to spiritual life. Okay, it's 1 minute till 8, so I'll end here. Verse 8, okay. But I'm just going to read the translation of these next, 3? Just the translation, not the purport, just so that we can finish the prayers of what the Lord said to the 4 Kumaras. I am the master of my unobstructed internal energy, and the water of the Ganges is the remnant left after my feet are washed. That water sanctifies the 3 worlds, along with Lord Shiva, who bears it on his head. If I can take the dust of the feet of the Vaishnavas on my head, if I can take the dust of the feet of the Vaishnava on my head, who will refuse to do the same? The Brahmins, the cows, and the defenseless creatures are my own body. Those whose faculty of judgment has been impaired by their own sin look upon these as distinct from me. They are just like furious serpents, and they are angrily torn apart by the bills of the vulture-like messengers of Yamaraj, the superintendent of sinful persons. On the other hand, they captivate my heart who are gladdened in heart, and who, their lotus faces enlightened by nectarian smiles, respect the Brahmins, even though the Brahmins utter harsh words. They look upon the Brahmins as my own self and pacify them by praising them in loving words, even as a son would appease an angry father, or as I am pacifying you. These servants of mine have transgressed against you, not knowing the mind of their master. I shall therefore deem it a favor done to me if you order that, although reaping the fruit of their transgression, they may return to my presence soon, and at the time of their exile from my abode may expire before long. Okay, so that's the end of the Lord asking forgiveness from the 4 Kumaras. And all right. So see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow we will, read those 4 verses, or however many verses. And then the situation of the Kumaras. The Kumaras replied to Lord Narayan. The Lord reconciled the situation. Lord Brahma concludes the narration. That's what we're reading tomorrow. Okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari, Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju ki jai, Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju ki jai, Nitil Pravishta Vishnupar, Ashtatara Shata Shrimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Srila Gurudev ki jai, Nitil Pravishta Vishnupar, Ashtatara Shata Shrimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj ki jai, Nitil Pravishta Vishnupar, Ashtatara Shata Shrimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitil Pravishta Vishnupar, Ashtatara Shata Shrimad Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj ki jai, Nitil Pravishta Vishnupar, Ashtatara Shata Shrimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai, Nitil Pravishta Maha-Bhagavat Srila Gorksharas Babaji Maharaj ki jai, Nitil Pravishta Srila Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai, Shri Rupa Nuguriya Guru Varga ki jai, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Bhatta Dashagunath Shara Goswami Prabhu ki jai, Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Vaja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj ki jai, Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund ki jai, Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi ki jai, Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai, Shri Bhakti Devi ki jai, Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya ki jai, Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai, Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavashaja Krishna Bhakti Padadevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha Pancha Kalpatarubhyashcha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat Pranam Indira Mataji, Mitra Vrinda Didi, Gargaraj and all others who are watching. See you all tomorrow. Jai Shri Radhe Haribo.